Oh, I forgot to mention, as an apologetics for my video, I will vote for any politician of any party that will outlaw JavaScript and its frameworks. You know, about that and about a justification and a defense for it and everything beyond just it makes a gross use of RAM utilization. Um, I'm under pressure to upgrade my RAM on this PC that I've got here, and to make it larger and get a bigger, amount of it. And, the truth of the matter is that these laptops are only going to last maybe 5 years or so before it becomes absolutely necessary to upgrade, them and everything. And what that means is that eventually it's all going to find its way towards a landfill at the end of the day, and it's going to add to the mass of our e-waste problem, as a consequence of all of that. And if because of the fact that JavaScript makes such a gross and inefficient use of our RAM, that it takes 200 megs just to print hello world on the fucking screen, which is absolutely fucking obscene, and its use of RAM utilization is just out of this fucking world insane. The layers of abstraction, like even Python is fucking terrible. Anyways, the just gross, gross use of our RAM and everything. And the web needs a new language that isn't as abstracted. Put this absolutely obscene, absolutely batshit crazy use of our resources and misuse of it means that it's just gonna mean more e-waste in America's landfills, and you know add and contribute to the problem. So it just makes it worse. Because now I have to upgrade my RAM, and that's just gonna mean that when this eventually ends up in a landfill, that there's even more, of e-waste as a consequence of it. So the fact that developers are doing this, and I get the merits of the language, but fuck you, work on the fucking Rust libraries, and make them compatible, and give them the GUI libraries so that you can make your websites in it, in Rust, because this is a fucking disaster, honestly, for the e-waste problem. And developers have stopped giving a shit at the end of the day about optimization of any kind, which is appalling. This is why, like, I started talking about running, the that Ubuntu application in order to to check the weather updates and everything, because it was just with curl and everything was just so much more RAM efficient than going out and bothering with the other ways of doing it. And I talked about, I'm not saying embrace tradition or anything, but old software was often written in, written in a time in which their computing resources were still scarce, and so the developers made efficient use of what the resources that they had at hand at the time that the software was originally released. And nowadays, a developer doesn't give a shit. They write this sloppy fucking JavaScript. They vibe code. They write this appalling shit that, like I said, these frameworks make it take 200 megs just to write fucking hello world on the screen. It's a fucking disgrace and everything. And, 16 gigabytes of RAM is just the bare minimum entry, for, using a laptop in the first place. But, really, if you want to be able to do everything I want to be able to do at the same time on my computer, you need more than that. And it's absolutely obscene, and it can be laid squarely on the back of the developers not caring. And they want something simple. They want to be able to port their applications to every platform at once, because every platform has a web thing. Things like the Node JS are not progress. They're the antithesis of progress. They're the exact opposite. They're taking tech backwards and ruining it, making everything worse. JavaScript isn't getting better. It's branching into more and more areas in which it was never, it wasn't designed for, and it's never welcome for. You know, like Node.js only fucking made everything 10 times worse rather than better. When I talk about, when I talked about moving away from the browser, I didn't mean with the fucking languages that are in the browser. I meant in the languages that aren't in the browser. So no PHP, no JavaScript, no, none of that shit. As far as I'm concerned, the web needs a third language, to make it more efficient. Anyways, the WebAssembly, with Rust, which is what all websites should be rewritten in, and from the ground up. It's a tragedy at the end of the day that all these applications that have been written in something else are not going to be completely rewritten from scratch in Rust. All of them should be, simply because it would make a better use of the RAM that we have on hand. I mean, it's a gig of it just to fucking load Facebook, because of the fact that it didn't use, a language that was at all efficient in terms of, the resource utilization that it had, and developers stopped caring. They developed this attitude of, oh, it uses too much. Well, in a few years things will get better. The hardware will get better. They've got big $4,000 laptops. They don't beefy developer laptops. They don't give a shit. And then moment better hardware comes out, they're able to adopt it right away at a rush. And so they don't give a shit. They don't give a rat's fucking ass, because they're paid out the ass for the code that they write. 4K, and so they stop caring about the little guys like me, who that's a significant burden of having to pay more to buy the RAM and upgrade our systems. And they've been totally blindsided at this point. They just stopped caring. They stopped giving a shit about anything. They didn't care about optimization. They just wanted to be able to run, to write their software once and have it run on everything at the same time, because that was the only merit of JavaScript. And so they started doing shit like making Node.js, taking everything backwards, ruining development. And so like I said, I'll vote for any politician of any major party that will draft a law to literally make it a crime to use JavaScript and its frameworks, outlaw it, and force these developers to go about solving the tech debt problem, and release a language for the web that actually is efficient and lightweight on its use of resources.